All right. We will call this June 7th Town Council work session to order. Welcome everyone in attendance and online as well. We have a fairly short, tight agenda. We'll work our way through that in the closed session at the end. Ms. McKay, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Amos,
Here.
Mr. Reed,
Here.
Mr. Dwyer,
Here.
Mr. Parrott,
Here.
Mr. Yolen, Mr. Hunter,
Here.
Mr. Hardy.
Here.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the monthly financial report provided by Finance Director Ms. Julie Moore.
Good evening, everyone. At this point in time, we're looking at the April report, so that's about 75% of budget to actual, and as you can tell that we're pretty much on track for that. I'm not going to go into any of the details of this stuff because honestly, it's the same thing that I've reported like the last 3 months to you, and anything that you want to know that's changed, you can just look at the explanations that are on the back of the charts. But does anybody have any questions on those?
Do we have any questions from anybody? I did notice the same thing. I was like, I feel like I'm reading the same thing I've been
Yeah,
reading.
because there hadn't been any major changes, and that's a plus.
It is a
So,
plus. Thank you. Let's see. How can we? I know Tommy likes to hear how much money has. Oh, that's.
But I can give it to you.
Sure. Yeah, we'd
All
love to
right,
hear.
So
it.
you're going to get this next week, but I'm really excited about this, okay? So first off, let me explain that, we have the VIP and we have the LGIP. Well, Benchmark also reached out to us and said, hey, you can have a sweep account. Just sweep all your main account money in and we'll invest it for you. And it's like at a 4% interest rate, which is really great. So I can tell you that for the month of May, with the sweep account, the VIP, and the LGIP, we earned like $70,000 of interest. Yeah, so look at there. So, yeah. So I'm hoping that just keeps going up. So,
Thank you. I've said it a couple times. I feel like, and I mentioned it to Scott the other day. It's been great having you here, and the combination of you and Scott being able to bounce ideas and thoughts off each other, and just the way it's all worked out has been really phenomenal. So thank you. Next item on the agenda is the proposed Farmville Town Council Rules of Procedure. This was a discussion brought up at the Town Council retreat and got added to the work plan. And so Scott has been working on some rules of procedure. Mr. Davis?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, you have before you rules of procedure that in essence really came from two different sources and kind of merged together. Two different localities, that one that I'm familiar with, one that I knew had these available from their website based on our moderator from the retreat. And so I'm open to any discussion or any questions. This was just something that I was asked to put together, have to you by sometime in June. So mark that on my evaluation when you get that. That was one met. But beyond that, I'm open for. I mean, these are how you all want to function. I'm just the person drafting them. I mean, it's up to you all what you like, what you don't. I can give you some opinions, and that's only it. But it's really up to you all how you want to deliberate and have rules. It pretty much spells out. Some of it comes from the charter, so you can't change it. Some of it is just about the quorum in general. Rules of debate, which that makes everybody familiar with the different areas of when you're debating as far as motions and seconds and motion to reconsider, what all those mean, when you can do it. It's 8 pages, but it's not really earth-shattering material.
No, it's not. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts based on what they've seen so far?
Correct me if I'm wrong, in the past, we've kind of done it on the fly, so to speak. We've not really been adhering to any specific rules, which to me, in my opinion, seems to work very well. But I mean, I have no problems with this whatsoever. If it's a formality that we need to address, then so be it.
That is correct. We have typically not adhered to any parliamentary rules or procedures. It's been, right, kind of at the presider's discretion. So that kind of leads it up to the personality of the individual in this seat. And so for me, I often view things from a proactive lens, right? Like, oftentimes something like this will come up as a result of something that happened, and I would prefer to get out ahead of that. I think from my perspective, I guess, I did bring this to Scott at one point a couple times, mainly around the idea that as culturally we seem to be leaning in on sort of eroding some norms. I wanted to establish a few and proactively look forward and say, okay, no matter who's in this chair or in these chairs, there will be some guardrails by which this body operates. At least, I mean, they're pretty much the guardrails we operate on now, but it's putting it in verbiage that people can read going forward. If anybody up here gets, decides to no longer be here, somebody else is up in the same spot, they now have those guardrails to sort of rein them in.
I may be wrong, but I think we've always been very respectful of everybody, and everybody's gotten along extremely well
Yes.
in operating. And I mean, I was just making a comment, that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. And that's why I mean to say, like, this is not a response to anything, but rather a proactive look forward into the future and say, no matter who sits up here, let's put down sort of the general guardrails of which we operate so that future bodies have them to sort of move. Yeah, and they are absolutely subject to change as we roll through. The only question I had was mainly a point of clarification. I was reading section B2 right at the beginning, and it was in reference to ordinances, and it said in, what's that? The B, section 1B2, references after discussion of arranging the agenda for the order of business. It says, in order for any ordinance or resolution to be acted upon at any regular meeting, a copy must be so furnished by the clerk, or it must be placed on the agenda by not less than 2/3 of all the members of council in the case of an emergency ordinance, or by the unanimous consent of all members of council in the case of other ordinances and resolutions. Is this in reference to just sort of last-minute additions while the body's in session? Okay. That was the only main point that I had. Does anybody else have any comments or questions regarding this at this time?
The only thing I came up with is, this is not just rules for us to go by, but also how the public can address us and kind of what their boundaries are also. And it does reference that you can have they have their 3 minutes, which they've always had, but it does refer to a 2-minute rebuttal. I was just trying to get in my head what the rebuttal process would look like as far as a procedure. I don't think we've had that previous.
That's only if they are the applicant of like a rezoning, a conditional use permit. That's a public hearing, not just public participation.
Okay.
So if you read that section, it says if you're provided, however, that the main proponent of any application, petition, or plan that is subject of a public hearing shall be allowed to address the council initially for a maximum of 3 minutes and later in rebuttal for a maximum of 2 minutes. In other words, they could use it as like a closing argument to their case to you of why you might have people in the audience that in the public hearing are against it. and they hear something that they might have left out, that they can pretty much summarize at the end of why it's important to them, or anything that has come up in discussion from you all, that they have the opportunity to have some other communication.
I would almost think that that would be necessary for the planning commission, much more so than us, for people who are applying for permits. I happened to sit in on the last one, and there was a time where somebody applied for a permit, and of course, they gave their reasons, and we gave our reasons, and that was the end of it.
I mean, that's up to them. They could do their bylaws that way, or if they want those rules of procedure. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're the decision-making body, and so it's really important because once your decision is made for them, it's final.
The only other thing I had, and most of this looks fairly similar to other bodies I've sat on, but one of the things that is different is serving on the board of DWR, we give often 5 minutes for people who represent like an organization. And I think that's in an effort to sort of collect all similar comments into that one person so that everybody from that organization doesn't feel like they need to get up and give their 3 minutes. You know what I mean? Not that it always works out that way, but.
That depends on the topic, like.
Well, then we have to actually define the organization in it. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Some people need more than 3 minutes to get everything out.
One of the places I look does give 5 minutes, but it's all in how long you want to be here and how long you want to provide time to listen. I left it at 3 because it was already 3. The only thing I added was the rebuttal.
Well, we do have a week to cruise over this and think about it.
You have as long as you want. I
that's
don't
true.
have it yet, a resolution or whatever. I mean, it's up to you all. I'm just bringing it tonight for discussion, and you tell me when you want it on the agenda again.
Excellent. Any other questions or discussion on those? All right, not hearing any. The next item is the discussion proposed resolution number 2023-0601 to allow for an accessory dwelling unit at 1204 6th Avenue. Is this going to be Ms. Atkins?
Ms. Atkins is going to handle both of these items.
All right. So yeah, and then discussion of proposed resolution number 2023-0602, another accessory dwelling unit on Millenwood.
Actually, I should say Mrs. Atkins Austin.
Good evening. CUP 23-002. The site is located at 1204 6th Avenue and consists of one parcel that is approximately a half an acre. The request is to renovate an existing bedroom, study, and bath inside the home into an independent living space for a daughter with learning disabilities. Entry to the accessory dwelling unit will be on the right side of the home, just behind the garage. Accessory dwelling units are permitted by conditional use permit in the R1 low-density residential district. This application appears to meet the standards of review for a conditional use permit set forth in section 24-13C1 of the Town Zoning Code. This use is compatible with the comprehensive plan's land use goals and strategies and the future land use map. The property is connected to town water and sewer and will not require any additional connections. There will be no significant impacts to the capacities of the utility or transportation systems. The site is a standard residential lot and is not located in a floodplain or other protected area. There are no impacted watercourses, steep slopes, or other atypical environmental factors. Emissions should be standard for residential use. The approval of this single instance will not have a detrimental effect on the neighborhood fabric or neighboring properties, as the accessory dwelling unit is housed inside the existing home. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this conditional use permit to Town Council with no conditions. I can take any questions at this time.
Do we have any questions from council regarding the accessory dwelling unit? Not hearing it. I will say I was talking to Scott earlier, and I was reflecting back on the evolution of cups in our packet. I really like the layout here and how succinctly the information is filed under each category, and it really makes it easily digestible, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we need to like move on to the next, or that we kind of covering them both at the same time? Resolution 2023-0602, accessory dwelling unit at 801 Milnewood Road.
This site is located at 801 Millwood Road and consists of one parcel that's approximately a half an acre. The request is to convert a space inside the basement of the home into an independent living space for a family member. Entry will be from the rear of the house into the basement. This application appears to meet the standards of review for a conditional use permit set forth in Section 2413C1 of the Town Zoning Code. Again, this use is compatible with the comprehensive plan land use goals and strategies and the future land use map. The property is connected to town water and sewer and will not require any additional connections. There is no significant impacts to the capacities of the utility or transportation systems. This site is a standard residential lot and is not located in a floodplain or other protected area. There are no impacted watercourses, steep slopes, or other atypical environmental factors. Emissions should be standard for residential use. The approval of this single instance will not have a detrimental effect on the neighborhood fabric or neighboring properties, as the accessory dwelling is located within the existing home. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval of this conditional use permit to Town Council with no conditions.
Any questions regarding the Milnewood accessory dwelling unit? It seems like we'll probably hear more of these as time goes on. I know I was reading up on a 2021 JLARC study about affordable housing and multi-generational household accessory dwelling units was a big topic. And I know that there was a House bill that tried to move through the General Assembly that would have created a model local ordinance for ADUs in single-family homes. It got tabled, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it come up again in the next session. So as we're just thinking about these conditional use permits, it'd be mindful of all of us that the General Assembly sometimes makes moves that attempt to take this decision process out of our hands. It'd be good to remember that as the next session comes up. Thank you. All right, item number 7 on the agenda is the proposed ordinance number 224, renaming of Watkins Street in honor of Reverend James Samuel Williams Jr. to Williams Way. This is the, Watkins Street is kind of the alley street off of High, and you want to speak to this, Mr. Davis?
I can. I had been contacted by the vice mayor, who had been contacted by some family of Reverend Williams. And he brought up for discussion for the council for his, what he's done in his time for the community. It's a street that he grew up in. The house that he grew up in is actually still on that street. So it's being brought to council to consider the naming of renaming of Watkins Street to Williams Way in honor of Reverend Samuel Williams.
Mr. Reed, do you have any additional?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I don't know how many people know Reverend Williams, but he's a civil rights community icon that's been around 80 years or more. He's a historian for Farmville. He's a pastor, was a past pastor of First Baptist and Beulah Baptist Church, and now he's a pastor at Levi Baptist Church. He's 8 years at Longwood College, Longwood University multicultural program, and he's involved in a lot of organizations. So the family reached out to me and wanted to honor him with renaming that street. And on that street, you only have 5 residents. I think it's 5 residents. 3 houses belong to Reverend Williams, 2 to Reverend Calvin Gray, and then you have 2 rental properties. So it's not a big street, it's like a alleyway, so that's what we're looking at.
Any questions or discussions concerning this item?
Just so you know, it doesn't require a public hearing, but I suggested to Mr. Reed that just so that the public is aware, especially those people that live on the street or own property, it's a good way of giving them notice of this happening. And then you'll notice in the ordinance that it won't take effect for, I think, 6 months, so that everybody has a chance to get with the United States Postal Service and take care of different business. The Postal Service can be ready for this, so that it's not just something that immediately happens.
I think anytime we consider this stuff like this, we consider whether or not, more of this comes down to us. And I think this is a pretty special case in that it's a small street where the individual has 3 of the residences on it. I will say I had the honor of seeing the Reverend give a sermon at a eulogy recently, and it was one of the more impressive sermons I've heard. It was really something to behold, and I had an increased appreciation for what he's brought to this community and the historical knowledge he has. So just wanted to put that out there. Do we have any other additional comments by the town manager and staff at this time?
Just wanted to give you knowledge that I'll be submitting a letter on behalf of the town in support of Prince Edward County's furthering of their permit for the Sandy River Reservoir. It goes in line with the resolution that you all have already passed maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And it just spells out a little bit more of how this could benefit us in the future, as far as if we had drought, that it'd be another source of water, but also the interconnection could be that it enhances our water supply down the road if the town were to need that. And so it helps their permitting process, and at the end it shows that us working together, and that in the future, if it's needed, it's another supply for the town. Also, ABM will have a preliminary finding on our buildings and water meters probably at the July meeting. So you'll get some feedback at the July meeting. And then staff met with Hurt and Profit in beginning stages of supplying them what information we do have in reference to water and sewer infrastructure, and also our water and sewer plants. And I know you all thought that initial contract was really low, and it was, but there'll be some more work that Hurt and Profit will have to do than what we can supply. And so when they actually begin to be able to tell you the age that we cannot of some of these manholes and that type of thing, I'll be coming back to you that that number is going up. It will go up, but not as much as what we had heard in the retreat possibly. So that's a good news. But that number was relatively low if we could provide all the data. As you know, we cannot provide all the data with some of the infrastructure here. So
There's a former resident of the town of Farmville, as a young man, who watched just about every pipe that was laid in the town of Farmville. Now, not back prior to his birth, but a gentleman by the name of Steve Tucker. He watched, he knows where just about every pipe in this town is. If there's questions to be asked, I think you'd find he'd know it.
that'd be helpful, but we need the actual what it's made of, the year, all that type of thing. Generality is helpful, but to know exactly what's there and the actual age or close in age, because of what it's made of, we can do that. So there'll be a little bit more coming, but I wanted to let you know that it is started and it will progress. The goal is to hopefully have it close to completion, hopefully by the beginning of the calendar year. So we'll see.
Have any other matters that need to come up before council at this time? I will say, I've had a few residents reach out about the air quality, given those wildfires and the hazy sky. It looks like so far it's been holding north and east of us, and we've been staying in the decent zone. But just do be mindful if you have asthma or respiratory setbacks, to just be mindful of that air quality and if the wind changes and shifts any of that down our way. With that said, we have a closed session. There won't be any action coming out of it that I'm aware of. Mr. Hardy, read us in.
I move that the Farmville Town Council convene in closed meeting pursuant to the Code of Virginia in accordance with the provisions of paragraph A6 of section 2.2-3711 for the discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, the financial interest of the governmental unit would be adversely affected, and paragraph A3 of section 2.2-3711 for the discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose or of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body.
Second.
Motion and second, well done. Ms. McKay, can we have do we need a roll call vote?
Mrs. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Dwyer?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Hardy?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move into closed session.
All right, Mr. Hardy, will you read us out?
Whereas the Farmville Town Council has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Farmville Town Council that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Farmville Town Council hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Farmville Town Council.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. McKay, you give us a roll call, please.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Dwyer,
Yes.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Hunter,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mrs. Amos.
Yes.
Thank you. If there's nothing else to come before council, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.